I should have been floating after everything we'd worked for, the prototypes, the failures, the sleepless weeks. Tonight should have felt like triumph. Instead, the second I stepped into the ballroom, it felt like I'd walked into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. My name is Dr. Evelyn Marsh. I'm 47 years old, and for the last 22 years, I've dedicated my life to spaceflight engineering. Co-founder and chief systems architect of Meridian Aerospace, or at least I used to be. The gala was supposed to celebrate our company's successful Mars transfer mission, the culmination of years of work. I had imagined it differently. Laughter, pride, maybe a little champagne. Instead, I got whispers and fake smiles. I wore the black evening jumpsuit Victor picked out. Futuristic without being sci-fi, he'd said. I'd trusted him on it, sleek but minimal, something that felt like me. But the minute I walked into the Hyatt Regency's grand ballroom, something was off. It wasn't just the way people paused when they saw me. It was the way their smiles thinned afterward, forced, nervous. A woman from Astratech nodded stiffly at me, then quickly turned back to her conversation. I recognized the back of her head. Lillian Wu, a board member who once hugged me after a successful static fire test. I stood frozen, wine flute in hand, as someone muttered, "Is that her?" "She still comes to these things," another voice whispered. I turned in time to catch two men I'd known since the ISS days exchange a look. One of them let out a breathy laugh and said, "Well, I heard Victor's thinking of upgrading, someone with more launch power." It was meant as a joke, maybe, but it hit like a slap. I walked past them with my shoulders squared and my chin high. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just nerves or tension. We'd just launched the most ambitious commercial payload to Mars in history. Tensions ran high at events like these. Still, my feet slowed as I passed each group. People I'd worked with, trained, mentored. Their eyes flicked toward me and away just as fast. "Poor thing," I heard someone mutter behind me. Genius brain, but no warmth. Like shaking hands with a motherboard. A younger man chuckled. "Yeah, but Victor's a visionary. He needs someone who can actually connect with people." I gripped my clutch tighter. No warmth. That was the new label. After 22 years of holding this company together, through failed thruster designs, loss of funding, the fires, the board's threats to pull the plug, I was now being treated like some defective relic from an older version of the company. And Victor, he was nowhere in sight. I scanned the room again. Crystal chandeliers cast light across a crowd that suddenly felt unfamiliar. The DJ played something jazzy but forgettable. Waitstaff floated by with canapes I had no appetite for. The last time we'd launched anything significant, Victor and I were in the control room together, fingers intertwined under the desk while telemetry streamed across the monitors. I had been hopeful. Tonight I still was, stupidly hopeful, that there was some other explanation for the cold shoulders and tight smiles. Maybe I'd just imagined it. Maybe Victor had planned some big reveal, and that's why people were being cagey. Maybe the gala had gotten too big too fast, and I was just overwhelmed. But even as I told myself that, I knew. You can't misinterpret a whole room holding its breath when you walk in. You don't hallucinate a stranger calling you the sterile brain with no warmth. I looked toward the main stage, where a crowd was forming. Cameras, reporters, engineers, that's where he'd be. I took a deep breath and started walking. Victor was exactly where I expected him to be. Surrounded by men in suits and accents, faces I recognized from venture roundtables and launch briefings. He stood at the edge of the main stage beneath a massive LED screen that looped footage of our latest payload separation in Mars orbit. I should have felt proud watching it. Instead, my stomach twisted as I saw Victor tilt his head toward one of the European financiers, grinning in that practiced wolfish way he used when money was on the table. He wasn't smiling like that when he left for work this morning. I crossed the room, nodding to a few familiar faces. Some nodded back awkwardly, others pretended not to see me. Victor caught sight of me just as I reached the edge of the circle. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, his expression shifted. Irritation, thinly masked behind a polite smile. "Oh," he said. "Evelyn." Like I was a surprise, like I didn't belong here. "I was hoping we could say a few words together tonight," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "To mark the launch?" Victor didn't even look at me when he responded. Let's not make a scene. A couple of the engineers, ones who used to run diagnostics under me, glanced between us and quickly looked away. I tried again. Victor, I've been part of this from the beginning. The Raptor X thruster, the telemetry array, that's still my name on the first patents. Before he could answer, someone stepped forward beside him, Elena. She wore a silver gown that clung like ambition, her dark hair swept to one side in a calculated asymmetry. She wrapped one hand around Victor's arm like she belonged there. "Elena Rhodes," she said sweetly to the group, though she was looking directly at me. "Special assistant to the CEO." Assistant, I remembered when she was an intern who couldn't route a TPS cable. Elena turned back to the others and said, loud enough to be heard over the music, "Tonight is really for the contributors. You know, the people who helped make this happen." A few people chuckled uncomfortably. I narrowed my eyes. "Excuse me?" Elena smiled like I'd stepped on her stage cue. "You're not listed anymore. As a shareholder, we made some adjustments after the last restructuring. Legal said it was cleaner this way." My heart pounded. Victor didn't correct her. I stepped forward. "I still own 19% of this company." Victor finally looked at me. Cold, flat. "Not anymore." That's when I noticed the security team. 2 of them. I knew their names. They used to hold the elevator when I stayed late. One of them approached. "Dr. Marsh, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." I blinked. "Are you kidding?" Elena crossed her arms. "We don't want a disruption. Not tonight." I turned to Victor. "You're really doing this? In front of everyone?" He didn't say a word. The silence in the room was sudden and complete. All around us, the crowd had stilled. Investors, engineers, journalists, watching the woman who helped build this company get quietly erased. My voice shook only slightly as I said, "You'll regret this." Then I turned, chin high, and let security walk me through the ballroom doors. I didn't cry. Not when the ballroom doors shut behind me. Not when the security guards mumbled an awkward apology on the way out. Not even when I stepped into the dim, half-empty parking garage and felt the concrete echo every footstep like a punchline. I found my car, second row, far corner, just like I left it. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and sat there with my hands still wrapped around the clutch like it was some kind of shield. My whole body was trembling, but the tears never came. Instead, I reached into the center console and pulled out the one thing I hadn't thought about in months: the watch. It was custom-made, sleek, silver, and etched with the words August 14, 2006, AEROSPACE, our first joint patent. I gave it to Victor on our 10th anniversary. He used to wear it every time we launched something new. I noticed he wasn't wearing it tonight. I held it in my palm for a long time, turning it over slowly. The second hand ticked like it didn't know everything had just collapsed. I set it on the passenger seat, and then I did what I do best. I focused. No panic, no outrage, just decisions. I pulled out my phone and called Philip Wong, my financial advisor of the last 11 years. He picked up on the second ring. "Dr. Marsh?" "It's Evelyn," I said calmly. "Effective immediately, I want to begin selling my 19% stake in Meridian Aerospace. Do it gradually, stagger the liquidation, but start now. Also, freeze all joint accounts connected to Victor Marsh. Business and personal." There was a pause. "Evelyn, are you sure?" "Yes, and one more thing. Transfer all recurring payments to the individual account ending in 5122, no exceptions." Another pause. "Understood." I hung up. Next call, Madeline, our travel concierge. The Mars Observatory trip was scheduled for next month. Victor had said it was a surprise anniversary gift, a week of red dust and corporate tours in honor of our partnership. The idea used to make me giddy. When she answered, I didn't waste time. Cancel everything under the Marsh party, the whole itinerary, and make sure nothing charges to my name. I can do that. Should I inform Mr. Marsh? No. The silence that followed was thick, but I didn't fill it. After that, I sat in the dark and checked each of my linked accounts. One by one, automatic deposits, signatory access, executive controls. I reviewed every line like I was prepping for a launch audit, not for him, for me. Every move felt mechanical, but behind the motion, something else had started to take shape. Not grief, not yet, something colder, sharper. Clarity. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just that Victor had replaced me in plain sight. It was that he'd believed I wouldn't fight back, that I wouldn't know how. He forgot who built the scaffolding that held him up. I looked over at the watch again, still ticking faithfully beside me. I didn't touch it. I just turned the key in the ignition, backed slowly out of the parking spot, and drove away without looking back. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. By the time the sun cracked through the blinds of my home office, I was already surrounded, not by lawyers or press, but by something heavier. History, 2 decades of it. I pulled the storage bins out from the crawlspace myself, dragged them one by one into the room where I used to review launch analytics and prototype schematics late into the night while Victor slept upstairs. Now the desk was cleared, the floor open, just me, a scanner, my laptop, and the bones of everything I'd built. I started with the earliest, the handwritten notes from 2003, back when the company was just a sketch on a cocktail napkin and a dream in Victor's garage. I found the faded receipts from the hardware store, where I bought the first round of test frame materials with my own money. $800 paid in full with a personal check. I still had the stub. Then came the early incorporation papers, signed with my full name, Dr. Evelyn Grant Marsh. I had filled out the original LLC application myself. I had registered the domain, opened the first bank account, and notarized our partnership documents. Not Victor me, I scanned everything, each document, each line item. I took photos of prototypes still stored in the garage, the early stabilization rings, the faulty thruster brackets, my handwriting in Sharpie across each of them. Then I pulled the patent binders from the bottom drawer, our first submission, his name and mine, side by side. I flipped to the copy of the 2006 patent office letter, the one that came with a bottle of champagne and a stunned kiss at midnight. I didn't cry then either. I just felt proud, stupidly proud. I added the document to the scanner pile. By mid-morning, my coffee had gone cold. My back ached, but the files were stacking up fast. Test logs, lab notebooks, beta flight reports, internal emails. I had forgotten how much of it bore my name, not just initials, my name. When my phone buzzed, I didn't even check the screen before answering. "Philip," I said. He cleared his throat. "We've started the staggered transactions. 3 separate buyers have already responded to our offers. Pre-market news is spreading, and there's been movement on the stock." "How much movement?" "Enough that Victor's probably sweating." I let the silence stretch. Then, "Good," I said. "Keep going." After we hung up, I looked back down at the open binder on the desk. It was from a propulsion design review in 2011. I had written the mission risk summary in red pen and circled a line in bold. "We either trust each other's math or we die on the hill." Apparently, Victor was willing to risk it. I wasn't. That afternoon, I backed up everything: scans, photos, originals. Redundancy across 3 encrypted drives and 2 clouds. I didn't know yet what my next move would be, not fully, but I knew this. I wasn't going to be erased, not quietly, not legally, not ever. The phone started ringing at 6:42 a.m. I was still in my robe, sipping black coffee and reviewing my scanned documents from the night before. I let it ring, Victor again, then a text. "Victor, we need to talk, please." 10 minutes later, "Victor, you've made your point. Don't destroy everything we built." By noon, I had 14 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 3 emails with the subject line, "Urgent." I didn't listen to any of them. At 1:17 p.m., a message came in from a number I didn't recognize. "Elena. Hi, Evelyn. I hope you're doing okay. I'd really love a chance to talk. Just the 2 of us. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. We're all professionals here." I stared at it for a moment, then typed, "Me. There's no misunderstanding. Dr. Evelyn Grant. Going forward," and blocked the number. Changing my name back wasn't emotional, it was mathematical, a variable correction. Evelyn Marsh had been slowly dissolving under someone else's shadow for years. Evelyn Grant knew exactly who she was. Later that night, my sister June called. I knew she would eventually. Victor must have reached out. And June was always eager to be the middleman, or in her mind, the peacemaker. "Evelyn, what's going on?" she asked, skipping hello. "Victor says you're not well, that you're unraveling." I let the silence sit. He said you stormed out of the gala and then started liquidating company assets, that you're acting irrational. I took a deep breath, calm as ever. It's not irrational to stop pouring energy into a system that no longer values your input. June was quiet for a moment, then, with a soft laugh. Okay, now you're just speaking in equations again. Look, I'm just trying to help. Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? No, I said. It's not a crisis. It's a correction, a breakthrough. She sighed. Evelyn, you were always the brains, but Victor, he kept you grounded. People saw him as the face. Exactly, I said flatly. There was a pause. I just don't understand why you're blowing up your life like this. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me, because it was never my life. Not really. I just kept the circuits from shorting while someone else took the credit for lighting up the sky. More silence. Then June said, He's hurting, you know. He says you're punishing him. Good, I said. Let him sit with it. She didn't call again that night. Neither did Victor. I stared out the window as the sun dipped behind the hills. They were spinning now, scrambling to contain a narrative they couldn't control. Let them. For the first time in years, I wasn't playing defense, I was building momentum. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, in tone. I was the first to arrive. That was intentional. I wanted time to set the stage. 12 leather chairs surrounded a polished obsidian conference table. At the center sat a brushed aluminum Meridian Aerospace logo, still partially smudged from last week's celebration. I placed a stack of files in front of each seat. Neat, precise, just like everything else I'd built. Inside each folder, scans of original patents, founder agreements, funding memos, and bank wires bearing my signature. Over 2 decades of silent labor now labeled, indexed, and ready for presentation. One of the board members entered, Rajesh Patel, longtime investor. He gave me a startled smile, like he wasn't sure if he should be polite or worried. Dr. Grant, he said carefully. That name still felt new on his tongue. I nodded. Please have a seat. More followed. Karen Shu, CFO Dr. Ian Rosen, Tech Oversight, then 3 others. One by one, they sat down and started flipping through the packets without speaking. I watched their brows furrow. Victor arrived last. He burst through the doors 5 minutes late, flanked by Elena, who carried nothing but a phone and a smirk. His suit looked like it had been chosen for battle. Charcoal gray, black tie, no color. His eyes landed on me and narrowed immediately. What the hell is this? I didn't stand. This, I said, is a presentation of fact. He turned to the board. She doesn't speak for Meridian. This meeting wasn't sanctioned by the executive team. Rosen cut him off. Victor, we received a formal shareholder request for this session. Legal reviewed it. Victor froze for a moment, then slowly turned toward me. You've been planning this, he said. Yes, I replied. Since the moment you had me escorted out of my own company. Elena stepped forward. This feels retaliatory. If this is about the gala. Sit down, I said. Not loud, just firm. To my surprise, she did. I stood and pressed a small remote. The screen behind me lit up with a simple white slide. M01 Founding Contributions, Dr. Evelyn Grant. I walked them through everything, my initial $3.5 million investment from liquidated personal assets, the technical patents with my solo authorship, the joint designs where I'd led architecture while Victor handled public relations, the payroll memos where I personally covered employee salaries during funding gaps in 2012 and 2015. Then came the bigger number, the one that made a few board members sit up straighter. Over $31 million of my personal wealth has gone into this company, not as a loan, as capital, as belief. Victor stood. You're destroying us. Do you know what kind of message this sends to investors? I clicked to the next slide, a transparent one. He looked around the room. No one spoke, not even Elena. I leaned forward slightly. You want to talk retaliation? I kept this company afloat through 2 recessions and 3 failed launches. And you let a junior exec tell the world I was expendable. His jaw clenched. What do you want? I folded my hands. For starters, your resignation. The silence was immediate. Then Elena gasped. Just a little. I looked at the board. Victor's mismanagement and concealment of founder contributions put the company at legal risk. I'm willing to waive arbitration if he steps down by quarter end. "And if I don't?" Victor asked, voice tight. I met his eyes. "Then I release everything, the records, the email chains, the footage. You'll spend the next year in litigation while your stock sinks." He stared at me, speechless for once. Then his gaze flicked to the folders, to his own initials stamped beside mine. He knew. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before I signed them. Not because I was unsure, not because I hesitated. I just wanted to be deliberate. I wanted the moment to match the weight of the years I was ending. The papers were thick, organized in neat stacks clipped with blue tabs where my signature was required. My attorney, Nadia, had color-coded everything. She said most people didn't read every word. I read every word. Each clause felt like an inventory of things I had once sacrificed. Not just assets, but pieces of myself. My time, my silence, my deference. I used to think compromise was just part of partnership. That being the quieter one, the practical one, made me strong. Now I understood it had just made me easier to erase. When I was done, I placed my pen on the table and looked at the final signature. Dr. Evelyn Ray Grant. I hadn't used that name in 22 years. Seeing it there, in ink, felt like stepping into sunlight after being underground. I faxed the signed copies to Nadia. She called me 20 minutes later. "Everything's in order," she said, sounding genuinely impressed. "Your documentation was airtight. We'll file this week." I anticipate very little pushback. I didn't say much, just thanked her. She paused before hanging up. "By the way, it's rare, the way you handled this. Most people unravel. You didn't flinch." "I already did my unraveling," I said. "I just did it in private." When the courier arrived, I met him at the door with the envelope. I'd written the destination by hand. Victor Marsh, CO Meridian Aerospace, Advanced Propulsion Division. Let him open it at his desk, probably surrounded by engineers too afraid to ask questions. I didn't feel satisfaction, not exactly. I didn't feel anger either. What I felt was space, the kind I hadn't known I needed. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and stood on my back deck, barefoot, wrapped in an old sweatshirt. There was no soundtrack, no celebratory music, just quiet. Victor and I had shared half our lives, but for the first time, I wasn't mourning the ending. I was breathing into the beginning. The first time I walked into the mentorship group, I expected it to feel awkward. I wasn't sure what they'd see. A disgraced co-founder, an ex-wife with a lawsuit behind her, but no one asked about Victor. No one even mentioned Meridian. Instead, the women around the table leaned forward, notebooks open, laptops ready. They saw me as I was, someone who'd built something from scratch and survived having it stolen. The program was called Lift Track. It paired seasoned engineers and founders with early-stage female tech entrepreneurs. I signed up to mentor, not out of charity, but because I remembered what it felt like to be the only woman in the room pretending I wasn't afraid. My first mentees were Kira and Sophie, both 20-something, both brilliant. They were building a drone mapping system for disaster zones, something lightweight and fast deployable. Their math was solid. Their business model wasn't. They didn't need a coach. They needed someone to believe in them, so I invested. Not a huge sum, but enough to get them through prototype and demo, enough to make them feel seen. They cried in the parking lot when I told them. I didn't. That same month, I started taking my camera out more often. It had been a hobby years ago, back when my time was still mine. At first, I just wandered. Empty labs, old testing sites, decommissioned launch pads. I didn't realize what I was doing until I looked at the photos one night and saw a pattern: peeling paint, abandoned terminals, rusted machines that once held fire and noise. They weren't just ruins. They were proof something had happened, that someone had been there. I started photographing women too, not posed, just in motion, designing, building, welding, presenting. I wanted to capture the moment before the credit slipped away. Word spread. By spring, a gallery director from Palo Alto reached out. He wanted to showcase my work in an exhibit called Structures. I almost declined, but then I looked at the title again. It was fitting. What we build. What holds. What's left behind when someone else claims the glory. I agreed. The opening was scheduled for October. 12 prints, all shot by me, all signed E.R. Grant. I still spent mornings reviewing pitch decks and spreadsheets, advising startups on everything from launch logistics to materials sourcing. But my afternoons, my evenings, those belonged to light and shadow. One day, I realized I hadn't thought about Victor in over a week. Not his voice, not his opinion, not whether he'd seen the headlines about my investments or the early gallery buzz. It didn't matter. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was just living, fully, finally, for myself. The gallery buzzed with soft conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. Framed prints lined the exposed brick walls. Women soldering, sketching, laughing, building. No placards, just first names in clean white text. Jada, Marisol, Amina, Ria. Near the center of the room, my photo hung, not of me, but one I'd taken. A rusted launch tower at dawn, lit from behind like it was still waiting for something to rise. I stood off to the side, watching a young girl point at one of the images and tug her mom's sleeve. That was the moment that got me, not the critics, not the buzz, but the look in that girl's eyes, like she could see a version of herself that didn't need to shrink. I didn't notice Victor until he was already beside me. He looked smaller, or maybe just human. Gray had crept into his beard, the sharpness in his jaw had softened. He wore a blazer he used to save for boardrooms, but tonight he looked like a man trying to belong somewhere he no longer fit. "Evelyn," he said. "Or Dr. Grant now, I guess." I nodded. "Victor." He stared at the photo directly in front of us. A young woman bent over a circuit board, laughing mid-mistake. "This is good," he said, voice low. "All of it. Thank you." "I meant what I said before," he added. "You're brilliant. You always were. I didn't know how to make space for that." I took a slow sip of sparkling water. "You didn't want to." He didn't argue. "I was wrong," he said. "Without you, the company, it never really had a center. It had motion, but no meaning. I see that now." I looked at him, really looked. There was no anger left in me, no regret either. He was part of my past, a piece of my orbit that I'd finally broken free from. "I appreciate the apology," I said gently. He smiled. "Just a flicker." "You're really done with all of it, aren't you?" I nodded. "I am." Victor stepped back. "Then I won't keep you." I watched him walk away, past the photographs, and out the door. He didn't look back. Neither did I. The crowd drifted, but I stayed where I was, breathing in the soft hum of women's laughter, the warmth of something earned. Not gifted. Not stolen. I didn't need him to see me anymore. I saw myself just fine. The road hugged the coastline, like it had something to prove. I rolled the window down and let the salt air wash over me. My cherry-red coupe purred along the asphalt, smooth and confident. A ridiculous indulgence, and one of the best decisions I'd ever made. It had been exactly 1 year since the gala. The headlines had moved on. So had I. I pulled off at a scenic overlook just south of Big Sur, stepped out barefoot, and leaned against the hood. The sun hadn't quite cleared the horizon, but the sky was already burning orange and pink. I reached for the camera on the passenger seat, not to shoot, just to hold, a habit now. Like a second set of eyes, in the trunk sat the final proof copy of Foundations, 200 pages, full color, heavy as a brick and twice as sharp. Portraits of women in aerospace, biotech, clean energy. Women whose names had been left out of press kits and patent filings. Women who had built, not boasted. The introduction read simply, "This is for the architects. My investment firm, Vanguard Horizon, now funded 9 startups across the country, all women-led, all science-forward. 2 of them had already hit revenue targets ahead of schedule. 1 had been acquired. None of them had asked me for permission to lead. That was the whole point." Sometimes I thought about Victor, but only in the same way I thought about the defunct launch systems we'd once prototyped. Useful for what they taught me, but ultimately replaced. We hadn't spoken since the gallery opening. I assumed he was still chasing relevance, maybe even rebuilding. That wasn't my concern anymore. I turned to the mirror, caught my reflection in the driver's side glass. Windswept, smirking, sunlit. Not erased, rewritten. I didn't need to win headlines or reclaim credit anymore. I had something better. Legacy, the kind that didn't need defending. The kind you passed forward, not upward. I climbed back into the car and turned the key. The engine kicked alive, and so did my next thought. a pitch deck from a pair of sisters in Tucson. New material designed for satellite shielding. I'd bookmarked their proposal last night. They didn't know it yet, but I planned to call them today, as the sun finally broke over the ocean, casting gold across the dashboard. I smiled and whispered out loud, just for myself, "Let's launch." And I drove on.